Hello, my name is Blaziken, and welcome to my Xiao video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about his builds, his teams, and whether or not you should pull for him. So yeah, stay tuned, and let's just get into it. So let's just jump right into his builds here. Weapons. Honestly speaking, his 4-star options are pretty mediocre. I mean, of course, Deathmatch is really good at higher refinements. At lower refinements, it's still decent, you know, great weapon all around. Black Cliff is of course a fine weapon as well, but compared to the 5-star options, well, the good ones, they're not great. Of course, there are some bad 5-star options, right? Engulfing Lightning is not great. This thing doesn't really do anything, honestly. I mean, he really doesn't need the ER, first of all, and you don't build very much ER on him because he doesn't need the ER, so it just goes to waste, honestly. It doesn't do that great for him. It's just, it doesn't do anything he needs, basically. Of course, Skyward Spine, kind of more of the same, but at least it gives you crit rate, I guess. But, I mean, it's pretty bad. Skyward Spines doesn't do very much for this guy. The attack speed's like, whatever, because he's plunging most of the time. It's just not great. Now, of course, the other 5-star options are pretty solid all around, right? The shield one, right? Zhong Li's weapon, Vortex Vanquisher. Really good, right? Because I'll talk about it later, but I really do think you really want to be running Zhong Li or some sort of shielder with him. So, I mean, that weapon's just going to be active. That's great. Homa, of course, is amazing on him. You do need to play it under 50% for this weapon to be incredible, but even without that, it's fine. But if you're under 50%, then this weapon's absolutely insane. In Primordial Jade Wing Spear, I mean, it's super easy to proc the passive on him. Like, it's pretty quick, you know, he hits a lot very fast, and his burst lasts a long time, so it's going to be up for most of that burst. It's really good. It's really solid. Crit rate is, of course, always good. And yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Calamity Queller is a little bit weaker than Primordial Jade overall. It's still really good, though. It's still really strong. Especially at C6. It's crazy at C6. But, you know, crit rate is really the thing that I would say makes Primordial Jade a little bit better. But, I mean, it's still a really good option, which is why this weapon banner is really interesting. Because if you are pulling for Xiao, and you have the Primo Gems to pull for a 5-star weapon, maybe you already have Zhong or whatever. If you don't have Zhong, maybe you should go for Zhong, but that's debatable, right? But yeah, if you have, like, the extra Primos to go for the 5-star weapon, it's so worth it. Calamity Queller and Jade are on the weapon banner. Like, if you pull either of them, you're good. The only bad part is that you can pull an off-banner weapon, which would suck. But hopefully you don't. So yeah. Other than that, though, I think that weapon banner is pretty damn good. So if you're running Xiao and, you know, you have the Primo Gems, you can try it out. Bit of a gamble, but, I mean, I guess everything is in this game. Alright, so with that being said, I guess I'll mention really quick Favonius Lance. It's kind of a bridge weapon. I wouldn't use it long term, but if you have nothing else, you can use this, so, you know. Lithic is also something I should probably mention. I don't think very many people have it, so it's probably not that relevant. But I think his team builds with this are pretty awkward overall. So, you know, I wouldn't recommend it. But, I mean, I guess they're still fine. So, continuing on then to the artifact set. 2VV2 Glad / Shimanal is obviously the best. He doesn't really need very many, well, set bonuses, because there's just not an amazing set bonus out there for him. And 15% animo damage and 18% attack, while that is a decent amount of extra damage, it's basically just substats, right? Like, you're not really getting anything additional from these sets, so you should just be running whatever pieces you have for him, right? And, like, you should be going to calc all your damage with your different sets and whatnot to figure out what's best for him. But yeah, generally speaking, of course, this is what you're aiming for, but not necessary. Something else to mention, real quick. There are really fun theory crafting ideas with, you know, 4VV and running him as sort of a burst support. The real problem with that is that Xiao's uptime is insanely high, and his downtime is extremely low. His energy recharge is great, so you're never going to really not be on field with him, and his burst lasts for so long that, I mean, he's just dominating the field time. And because of that, it's really, he doesn't work very well as a support, right? Now, I think that there is an interesting theory here, though, because Xiao's specialty is AoE damage, right? And for whales in particular, where we have so much damage, Xiao is really great as an animo sport maybe, because of his versatility, right? So like, for example, in Wanderer's Threefold, there's a really fun team that we theorycrafted, which was Xiao with Ganyu. And the reason why this works is because Ganyu kind of just beats the first two bosses, which Xiao C6 is terrible against because it's just one boss. But the third boss is the Triple Mago Kenki, and Xiao completely destroys them. And basically every other DPS had a pretty hard time there, especially because they had elemental resistances against Pyro, Cryo, and Physical. So, you know, kind of hates against all the top tier DPS other than Xiao. So because of that, you could basically pop a Bennett Burst, pop a Ganyu Burst, not in that order, opposite order, but yeah, do that. And then go into Xiao, and then just C6 away. And you could kill basically the two reflections at least by the time Xiao's burst ends. And that's crazy, right? And the point that I'm making here is that Xiao can basically make your team much more comfortable, more versatile, just because he brings a different type of damage to the team that you might not have access to. And of course his burst is just so high, so you're getting that damage in a very short period. So that's the basic premise of this theory crafting. But for a non-C6, it's just not viable. You don't deal enough damage with him, you don't deal enough damage with your, you know, your other DPSs to really, you know, justify this at all. So it just doesn't work out very well. But in the future, it could. So, you know, this is just something to always keep in mind for your, like, theory crafting tool belt, team building tool belt. You can make individually powerful characters just fit together on team, you know, by having more versatile characters, right? Like each character doing something different, basically. They can be individually powerful, but they add a lot to the team because they're different types of characters. You know, this isn't the same concept as, like, you know, national team and those teams where there's a ton of synergy between the characters. There's not that much synergy, right? It's literally just VV on Xiao. That's a synergy, quote unquote. But the point is that the individually powerful characters are able to basically clear content by themselves, and then having them together on the team makes that content more comfortable. But yeah, that's a basic idea. Really long-winded explanation, I'm sorry, but hopefully it's helpful. I think it's really interesting to theory craft about things like that. But yeah, with that out of the way, substats, I mean, well, main stats, I guess. Crit, animo damage, and attack, of course. No point going ER, he doesn't need it, and it's just way too big of a damage loss to go attack percent. Yeah, bad idea. And substats, of course, crit, always really good. Attack percent's great on him. And, you know, a little bit of ER here and there is great. I think you don't really need more than like 120, 130 ER, so it should be fairly easy to hit with substats. But yeah, I think I'm pretty comfortable with like around 120 ER, so that's how I feel. But I don't have any numbers to back that up. I haven't done that testing, but yeah, for me it's pretty comfortable. As long as I have an animo battery, which you probably should have. Alright, so moving on to talents then finally. You should definitely prioritize your normals. It's going to give you a little bit more damage than your burst, so that's great. And then your burst, and then your elemental skill. At C6, of course, your elemental skill becomes way more important. And overall, I think you definitely want to level all of them up generally. But yeah, I mean, that's on you. This will give you the most damage, this will be next, and then this will be last. So yeah. Now of course, there's probably some weird nuances with like getting these to A first and then getting this to A, or like whatever it may be. I'm actually not sure about all that, but yeah, generally speaking, this is going to give you most damage, then your burst, and then your E. So yeah. With that being said, that's it for his builds, and let's just jump right into the teams. Alright, so a couple quick things just to get out of the way really quickly. This current Abyssal Moon buff is significantly stronger for Xiao than the previous one, and all of these, you know, gameplay showcases that I'm doing are recorded in the previous Abyss. So my Xiao is way weaker than yours should be. But of course, I think that I'm giving a much more realistic representation here, so cool, fantastic. But yeah, your Xiao in this current Abyss will be hitting harder, but in future Abysses, probably not the case, right? So yeah, that's the first thing. Number two, Xiao's combo that you should be doing is low plunge spam with charge attacks, right? For, you know, lower density of enemies. If you have a ton of enemies, of course, like, just plunge spamming is more efficient because the charge attack's not going to be hitting all of the enemies, but if you can hit all the enemies with charge attack spam, well, low plunge into charge attack spam is the way to go. I don't do that because I'm lazy, and, you know, it's not an enormous amount of extra damage, but if there's a bit of damage there that I'm losing. And yeah, I mean, that just makes it so I guess I'm doing less damage than I'm supposed to be, and, you know, you can closer replicate my damage then. So cool. Finally, my build is, as you saw, only level 8 talents, so I'm doing a little bit less damage. So yeah, with that being said, I think this is fairly realistic. With a crazy build and 4-star weapons, well, Refinement 5 like Black Cliff or Deathmatch, you'll be pretty close. And yeah, that's about it for that. Moving on to the actual combos. As I've already said, low plunge into charge attack is the way to go. If you are facing a ton of enemies, a huge group, then high plunge is actually better. It's just more efficient for a group of enemies. And then of course, if you can actually hit a mob's hitbox with your plunge, then you will hit it twice basically. Once with the hitbox hit, and then once when you hit the ground. So there's a little bit of extra damage that you can squeeze out, but it's kind of annoying to try to do that, so, you know, you don't have to do that, but something to keep in mind, just to have in your toolbox, right? And yeah, that's about it for the combos. Now that we've gone past that, we have to talk about particle funneling. This is pretty important for Xiao. Basically what it is just 2 E's before your Q, and you just do 2 E's and immediately press your burst. And all the particles that you get from the E's will go into you right when your burst pops basically, and you'll get the energy from those 2 E's when you know, Q. That's pretty good. You're gonna have a head start on your energy generation, which is pretty important, because Xiao doesn't generate energy when he's in his burst, right? Well, at least not with his elemental skill. That's pretty important. 2 E's, they have a 20-second cooldown. His burst is 18 seconds, right? But of course, the first E is when the cooldown starts, so the second E's animation has to play, and yeah. Basically, it's pretty much both E's are going to be up by the time your burst is done. That's pretty good. You do want Animo Battery on your team, of course, to supplement any energy gain, right? Jean's doing that here. By the way, my Jean's not C4, so you don't have to worry about that. And outside of that, there's like very specific interactions, like I think Sucrose 1E into Xiao 2 E's, and then into the Q, you'll actually absorb like the Sucrose particles as well. Yeah, basically with that, you shouldn't really have any energy problems with Xiao. Like, it should be pretty comfortable, and you should just have his burst up basically all the time. Alright, so let's go ahead and mention one of Xiao's downsides. And that's playing without Zhongli. Zhongli's kind of the best shielder in the game. There's no other option that comes very close. And without Zhongli, it's really annoying to play Xiao. His uptime is so high that a ton of heals just run out before Xiao's burst ends, and you have a decent amount of time where if you don't stick in with Xiao, you're going to lose a ton of damage, but if you do stick in with Xiao, of course, you're going to be taking a ton of damage, and you could die, he's draining his own health. It's a huge pain, right? So that's kind of annoying. And, you know, looking at the healer suite, right? Some of the more common healers, right, like Hakomi and Bennett, right? These characters don't really last long enough to give Xiao enough time to not die, right? Like, a Bennett burst lasts for 12 seconds, which seems like a long time, but if you Bennett burst, switch into Xiao, double E into his Q, you're already burning like 3-4 seconds, and at that point, like, you have more than half of Xiao's uptime without a healer. That's pretty rough. You can pretty easily die like that in Abyss. It's annoying. Of course, you can play around that. Xiao can dodge because he's quite mobile, quote-unquote. While you're in the air, you can just basically glide to avoid attacks, and that works pretty well. But to do this, of course, you can be pretty well acquainted with all of the mobs, really know their tells and their attacks and stuff, otherwise it's going to be super inefficient. And even, you know, knowing all that, it's still pretty inefficient. You're losing a ton of damage by doing this. So yeah, overall, it's super annoying without Zhong. Zhong's really good because, you know, you're just going to be shielded the whole time while you're bursting, and that's a big deal. Now, Zhong's coming up in the next banner, so, you know, I recommend pulling for him if you are pulling for Xiao. It's quite nice to have Zhongli, but, you know, you can learn to play without Zhongli. It's just a decent amount less efficient, and I think it's a lot more annoying. Now, the next problem I have with Xiao is that he staggers a lot, right? That's just a result of how he plays, right? He's just plunging a lot, and that causes a ton of staggering. And with this, you do have to follow your opponents, right? You can just directional input while you're plunging and you'll follow them slowly. But it's super annoying because the real problem here is that it's going to be knocking you out of your Bennett burst, basically, right? Like, the mobs are going to get knocked out and then you have to leave your Bennett burst in order to hit them. That's kind of bad. Of course, other things that are super annoying, it screws up grouping. Like, it'll split groupings pretty easily. The way you kind of play around this is by using wall abuse, right? Like, slamming them into the wall and abyss. But even then, like, you'll probably screw up grouping. Like, they'll probably split sideways. It's just a very annoying thing that you have to play around that, yeah, definitely pay attention to. Of course, Jean is not like Bennett, because her heal is instantaneous, so, you know, even if you're knocking the mobs out of Jean's burst, it doesn't really matter, you're getting all your healing from Jean immediately, so it's not a big deal. That's why Jean's such a great option for a healer for Xiao. And of course she's also an animal petter. She just covers so many problems that Xiao has, so this is why the Jean Xiao, Zhongli beta is like the quintessential Xiao team. So, I'm going to just quickly summarize what I've said. Xiao's super good in Vis, it's super comfortable, but I think that playing him is a bit tough if you don't have Zhongli. It's super annoying, there's a lot of problems that arise, so be careful of that. You know, he also doesn't have great 4-star options for weapons, so 2 things to consider. But if you have Zhongli, if you have any 5-star options, he's super strong. Like, really, really comfortable clears in Abyss. His AoE damage is just insane, right? I mean, he's really good. I think his teams are a little bit whale, you know, his weapon choices are a little bit whale, but yeah, you live with it. A lot of free-to-plays will have it. I mean, Primordial Jade, standard banner weapon, people might just have it, right? This weapon banner, by the way, has 2 spears that are great for Xiao, so, you know, pull on it, get a 5-star weapon, you're good. And then, yeah, Zhongli's coming up. I think that you got all your bases covered if you're pulling for Xiao. So yeah, I mean, if you have the 5-star weapon, if you're getting Zhongli, pull for him. I think he's pretty good. If you don't like playing him or whatever, then obviously don't. And if you don't have all those, like, you know, 5-star options and 5-star characters and good teams, then maybe you can consider skipping, but he's still pretty strong. Yeah, I mean, overall, I think Xiao's really strong still. He's really great. If you're pulling for him, fantastic. If you're not, I mean, I guess there's good reason not to. But yeah, overall, if you have the whale investment to make, he's really good. Otherwise, he's still pretty good. And yeah, great DPS, really fun, really insane AoE. So yeah, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did like it, please leave a like, comment down below if you have anything interesting to say, subscribe to my channel for more content, and yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.